Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com to find more information, along with our RSS feed. And follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod. Well, it was a pretty good July 4th weekend for me. I recorded next week's show, started reading for the following week's guest, made a little art, had a couple of nice meals, worked out a bit. I also, I had two conversations yesterday, both of which were meaningful in their way. First, I got together with one of my old running partners. I haven't run since mid-March, but my pal had surgery last week, and he's only allowed to walk for the next 3 or 4 weeks, which is killing him because he runs 30 to 40 miles a week, and he's been doing this for 25 years, about 70 now. In fact, he got in all of his qualifying races before this procedure, just in case the surgery knocked him out for an extended stretch or something. Anyway, I checked up to see how he was doing and then told him I'd drive over and join him for a walk. And we wound up doing 5K, 3.1 miles. And we just spent time catching up on life, health, idle conversation. We texted intermittently since I stopped running. But our real mode of communication is just chit-chat while eating miles. And it's why I never suggested just going to his place and hanging out on the front porch and talking. We need to be in motion. My wife asked about this. She said, can't you just go over to Fran or Pete's place and just talk? I'm like, no, we can't. We have to be moving. We got to be running, or in this case, walking. So it was good just talking with a pal, because outside of Amy, I don't really have social interaction in my life. I mean, there are pod guests, but that's every week or so. And, I really just don't talk to anyone. So we're planning to get together for more walks as he continues to recover. And of course, I've started thinking about how to rehab my various leg problems to see if I can actually get back to running. Just not the 30 to 40 miles a week I was doing before, because that invariably leads to my body breaking down, which I know intellectually, but, in practice it becomes more difficult. Anyway, I said two conversations. The other one's a conversation I had 7 years ago. See, I was cleaning up this AI transcription of the podcast I did with Clive James back in 2015, so I can edit and excerpt that for the next issue of Haiku for Business Travelers. And that meant playing back the whole conversation so I could clean up the text. And that meant revisiting not just what might be my greatest episode ever, but also who I was in 2015. And while there were some, I don't want to say missteps, but, there were less fruitful avenues we went down at different points, we really got somewhere special in 75 minutes or so of conversation. And by the end, where we really talked about regrets and family and whether his mother ever appreciated his success, I began to tear up a little bit this time. Maybe it's being on the other side of 50, or maybe it's because I've been diagnosed with the same leukemia that ultimately killed Clive. I don't know. I've gone on ad nauseum about how my life has changed in recent years, but coming face to face or voice to voice with this earlier iteration of myself in this key moment that maybe changed the course of who I am, but made the conversation take on a whole new layer of significance. So anyway, that was my July 4th. I hope yours went well. So let's get to this week's show. I recorded this one 3 months ago. It's a weird one, but I recorded back in April of 2022. This was my first live session since the before time, as in live with an audience. And my guest is the great illustrator Joe Ciardiello. And the occasion was the debut of Joe's exhibition at Art Yard, this art center in Frenchtown, New Jersey, of work from Joe's fantastic, fantastic book, A Fistful of Drawings from Fantagraphics. Joe and I recorded about A Fistful of Drawings in 2019 because I was just flabbergasted by how good that book is. But this time around, he asked me if I'd interview him at the event in a session that would follow his presentation about his life and his work and art and spaghetti westerns. Now, I love Joe, and I love his art, and I figured the COVID threat would be pretty minimal since we'd be up on stage and the audience was going to be masked up, and, well, I took a chance and said yes. Plus, I hadn't been down to Frenchtown since the before time, and I was really looking forward to checking out the new Frenchtown bookshop, which is absolutely wonderful. I got to see a couple of other places that I saw the few times I'd gone to Frenchtown before the plague. But I had not seen, because it's brand new, Art Yard, and that place is just a wonder. Exhibition space, auditorium, sculptures on the grounds outside, right above the bank of the Delaware River, just this incredible space. And, well, just getting to see it was a revelation. I'm hoping to get down to Frenchtown sometime this summer. I follow them on Instagram, Art Yard, which is ARTYARD. Yeah, it's just great to see something like that, relatively close, maybe 60, 70 minutes for me, but not in New York, going the other way towards Pennsylvania, towards the Delaware. It's, wow, it was really something. Anyway, Joe's exhibition at Art Yard has already run its course, but you should go order a copy of A Fistful of Drawings. Just look at Joe's work and follow his exploration of Westerns and the Italian-American experience. He does a phenomenal job with it. The drawing is gorgeous, and, well, now that I've tried making art, his use of color in his illustration makes me feel even worse about my own, soak the page watercolor tendencies. I'm learning a lot from looking at his work, and I have a few of Joe's pieces hanging on my wall in the house, illustrations he did of Henry Miller and Philip Roth, as well as the one he did of me that was a thank you gift for this event, which I have not framed and hung up yet because that would be weird. Just looking at his lines and seeing how much he evokes with what looks like just a casual stroke of the pen. It's, oh God, he's such a good illustrator. Anyway, like I said, the conversation here, which includes questions from the audience, followed Joe's PowerPoint presentation about his art. And one of the neat things that he showed us during the presentation was this sort of evolving sketch page, which is a model he's doing now in his free time, I guess. This one in particular was centered on a drawing of Samuel Beckett, but it evolves into many other drawings with the lines creeping around the page and overlapping and evoking different faces and figures, as well as a very distinct figure and watercolor of Andre the Giant. I mention this because it comes up in our conversation, and I'll have an image of it in the show notes for this episode. But anyway, I'm prattling on, as is my thing. Joe Ciardiello is this week's guest in a live conversation recorded at Art Yard on April 8th, 2022. Here's Joe's bio. Joe Ciardiello was born and raised on Staten Island, New York, just a ferry ride to Manhattan, where he attended the High School of Art and Design and Parsons School of Design. A freelance illustrator since 1974, Joe has worked for most major magazines, newspapers, and book publishers, including Entertainment Weekly, The Nation, The New Yorker, The New York Times Book Review, and Rolling Stone. His drawings have been exhibited in galleries and museums throughout the country. Among his awards is the prestigious Hamilton King Award from the Society of Illustrators in 2016. Joe lives in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, and his most recent book is A Fistful of Drawings. And now, the live 2022 Virtual Memories conversation with Joe Ciardiello. And I'm going to ask you, given how important music has been in terms of the illustration you've done and what it's meant to your career as it's developed, what music did you listen to while you were working on the Fistful of Drawings?
Oh, Ennio Morricone.
I assumed.
Constantly, and still do. I mean, I loved his music before, but working on this project, I really went in deep and explored it a lot further. I mean, the Western scores only amount to, I think he says, 1/8 of. I mean, he's composed like 500 scores for film and television, and maybe 40 of them or 38 were Westerns, which is still a lot by anybody's comparison. But for him, he dismisses that, like it's frustrated him that he's known mostly because of the Western scores, which were very early in his career.
Yeah, the Mission soundtrack is always one of my faves, and it's so non-Western as those go. What's it like revisiting the work for A Fistful of Drawings, given that it's now come out as a book, seeing it on the walls up there, and seeing it in this sort of gallery setting? How different is it for you seeing that work in one format versus the other?
I don't know. It's nice. It's nice to see it. I mean, I'm pretty proud of the work. I'm extremely critical of my stuff, and I don't often like what I do, but in this case, because it was a project, very close to my heart and something I, developed myself, I'm proud of the work. So I'm happy to see it out of the context of the book.
And how did it really come together? Given that you're making these drawings, at what point did you realize this is something you wanted to coalesce into a book?
Well, I think I started to say about my grandfather during the slideshow, and I didn't finish that thought. This thing began because of a conversation I had with him over a Sunday dinner at my parents' house when I was working on that Buffalo Bill biography that I did, a couple of years out of art school. And I mentioned, I was just talking about what I was working on at the time, and he very casually said that he saw Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. And, that just really kind of threw me. I wish now, and this is so many years ago, but I wish now that I had pressed him further on details about that. I don't know where he saw it or how young he was. I assume he didn't see it in Italy. He probably saw it. I mean, he did a lot of odd jobs when he came over here, and he spent some time in Ohio working at the B&O Railroad, painting, stenciling trains, and as a bricklayer and various things. So he could have seen that show out in Ohio. He could have seen it in Manhattan. The Wild West show did perform 2 seasons on Staten Island, but that was in the late 19th century. So I know he didn't see it then, but yeah.
And just over time, as you started to, did you know it was going to be this sort of project, or did it really start more personally with, just sketch?
Yeah, I started to do a few drawings, and I think early on I thought I'd like to see this happen as a book, and Monty Beauchamp, who I think you probably know, publishes Blab magazine.
And has the most wonderful name in cartooning.
He, I approached him because I thought maybe he'd be interested in this. And he suggested that I start a blog, build up sort of build up a following for it and have a blog as an outlet to post the work as I did it. And so that's what I did. I started a Tumblr called Spaghetti Journal, or Joe Ciardiello's Spaghetti Journal. And I would, add to it. I was working on jobs, in and around jobs. I would do, every time I did another drawing, I would post it on there. And, and I did that up until the book was published.
And given that your commercial work is, we'll say, static, it's not narrative, and that these works, what's in A Fistful of Drawings, you not just through the verbiage, but you create a narrative thread throughout it. How challenging was that for you?
That was challenging. I mean, the writing was more difficult than creating drawings, because I'm not a writer, and so that was tough. But I wanted to keep it.
If you haven't read the book yet, he's lying. He's a good writer. But...
Well, I never consider myself a writer, but thank you. But I thought of it as a journal. I call it a graphic journal. It's not a graphic novel. It's kind of a graphic memoir, but I call it a graphic journal. So I wanted the handwriting, to be similar to the drawing, and that way I felt I could get away with my poor grammar and my lack of skill as a writer if it's just written in hand as kind of a scrawl, and like someone would write in a journal. They're not thinking about, this is going to be a published book.
Well, we'll say it feels conversational, which, is always my half-assed way of writing, too. And, no, this is just how I speak. So, you keep up with Westerns nowadays?
Yeah, I do. I try to see, there's actually quite a few happening right now. Yeah. Westerns, it goes in waves. I mean, they fall out of favor for a period of time, and then they come back into favor. It takes one or two that make a splash, and then they'll fade away again. It's such an American art form that it's always going to be around in some way. I mean, even, gangster films became the new Western. Star Wars, George Lucas considered a Western. Yeah. Martin Scorsese considers Goodfellas a Western. I mean, it's... And he has his first Western coming out.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
I remember we talked about it in the past, that you were always hoping there'd be a Scorsese Western.
I was hoping he would do a Western, and it's finished filming and is editing it now, and probably in the fall it'll be out.
What do you think the genre really says? And one of the aspects of the book is how it ties into Italian-American culture. Even though the Western... There's always criticism. Anytime any non-WASP figure is brought into the Western historically, there's always some sort of backlash. Yeah. Why do you think it particularly resonates, and the Italian roots that come through?
John Wayne hated the spaghetti Westerns.
Yeah.
And I didn't care for John Wayne, so...
And we saw pushback with The Power of the Dog and non-conforming sexuality in the Western and everything else. But what do you think the Western really brings to America?
Oh, geez.
And to Italians?
Gee, I don't even know that I can have a qualified answer for something like that. It's, to me, it's just something so uniquely American, and it speaks to the period that the films were made in. Whatever society is going through at the time, it's kind of reflected in the Westerns. So you can see that change happen from say, John Ford's Stagecoach in the 1930s, up to something like Power of the Dog. Where our culture is reflected in the Western, in that genre. It can kind of encompass so much.
Since we've last talked, I took up drawing myself, which I'm now feeling like an absolute heel being around a real artist like you. But I wondered, watching the slideshow, the early illustration you showed of Clint Eastwood and that Drucker Davis, especially Davis vibe you had to it. I know art is imitation, initially, whether it's writing, drawing, etc. When did you find your line? When did you really feel like you became you? Or do you?
I'm still looking for it.
Yeah.
But I think, like I mentioned with Jim Spanfeller, that period, that kind of set me on the course when I was in college. So that's when I kind of made a decision that I really liked working in line, and I thought this is an area I really want to pursue because it was fun. I felt enjoyment, which I hadn't felt before. I mean, I tried everything. I was painting like we all do. You go through various mediums, but that was where I found line to be something I wanted to explore, and I've been exploring that for 48 years now, and still doing it. I haven't gotten it. Every once in a while I get very close.
Yeah.
But it's so hard. It's rare that happens.
Do you feel you're learning still?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. I'm trying to crush through all of that stuff at the age of 50 and 51, so it's a little different than doing this.
Well, I admire your discipline, like I've told you. You try to draw every day. That's
I have enough trees outside. I can just draw those anytime I get bored. But tell me about you and making more art. You mentioned that new direction with the Beckett and Andre thing. What does that comprise? What's it consist of?
Well, it's
where are you going with your art?
I've been doing this for years, but I never thought about it as anything other than I'm just playing around. They start as false starts. Because I like to draw directly with pen. I don't like to do any preliminary sketching or work in pencil. Or for assignments, I have to present a sketch to a client to be approved, and then I can't veer too much from that. But work for myself, I draw directly with pen, and what happens is you just start drawing, and sometimes it goes nowhere. A blank piece of paper is the most intimidating thing, as I'm sure you're learning.
Rub my nose in it. Go on, sorry. Go on.
So, it's kind of like a trick I play with myself I'll take a scrap of paper that already has something drawn on it. So it breaks the ice. I can just start drawing on that page and not think that this has to be anything finished or anything anybody's ever going to see. And it just kind of trying to free my brain up to not be uptight and loosen up and be spontaneous and get into that playful kind of zone where drawing it is fun. The process is fun. And so I've been doing this for years, but I only recently have been thinking about this. And I accumulate piles of these things. Now, often after a while, I start discarding them because, it's just filling up space, and I have no space in my studio as it is. Just ask my wife. So I'm drawing over things that are already drawn on the page, and sometimes something interesting starts to come of that, and then I'll bring it out. I'll work areas of it up, and so I've been kind of more conscious of this now, and I've been saving some of these things, and I feel like there's something to explore more here. It's not illustration anymore. It's something else, and I don't know. It may not go anywhere. It just may be another collection of drawings stuffed into my flat files. But it's kind of fun right now, and I'm looking to explore more of that,
and potentially more Western. Is there for a few drawings more out there?
Well, it's funny because the book I am working on my next book, and it's a music themed book.
Okay, I have to jump in here and explain that Joe asked me to cut this part where he talks about an idea for his next project, but trust me, it is awesome. I'm really hoping he follows through with it, but I'm not going to tell you anything about it. And now, back to the show. Who do you Who do you never get tired of drawing?
Samuel Beckett.
I assume with the wrinkles in the hair and everything is just... Yeah.
I have a lot of drawings of him. I mean, his face was made to draw.
Yeah.
Just draws itself, really.
Yeah. Musically? As a musician, you...
To draw, you mean?
Yeah.
John Lee Hooker is fun to draw.
And do you prefer drawing musicians or writers? I know they're very different.
Really,
it's different assignments.
It depends on the person and their face and what I see. And then, I don't think I have a preference. If it's an interesting subject that looks interesting to draw, it's really the source material for me because I'm drawing mostly from photographs. So if I come upon an interesting, the photographer's done a good deal of the work, so. That's the starting point for me, getting good scrap material to work from, whether it's a musician or a writer or just an interesting face that's, not anybody in particular. Yeah.
When you mentioned going down various rabbit holes during the pandemic, as we all have, jazz drumming, you've been able to keep it up during this, or do you really need a band?
I haven't been able to play. I mean, Sunday will be the first time I'm getting together with one of the bands I play with for a rehearsal because we have a gig coming up in May, and it's a blues band, but I haven't really had that chance to play. I have my drums are set up all the time in my studio, so. I sit down, for 5 minutes or so and start banging around a little bit. There's something I hear on the radio or something inspires me to play. But there's nothing like playing with other musicians, especially for a drummer. A guitarist or pianist can play by themselves, but a drummer, you really need somebody to play with. So.
And the whole Zoom thing, there's too much latency with the...
I don't know how to do that. I barely know how to...
That's why we're doing this in person. There's just no way we could do this remote. I would love to... my eyes are starting to adjust. I would love to take questions if someone should ask a question here. I raise a hand. There you go. You.
Samuel Beckett. Are you a fan of his work, or you just like his face?
I like his face. I have to admit, I've seen Waiting for Godot. But, various versions of it. But I'm I can't say I'm a Beckett, person.
I tried the 3 novels, Malloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable last year, and I'm glad I didn't read them in college. But I think you're better off just drawing them. Yep.
How do you look at a face? When you are facing a face,
how do you look at a face? What do you see?
Do you have a system for thinking about them, or is it an unconscious process?
It's probably unconscious. I mean, it's about observation, so it's just really looking. And if I'm looking at somebody, I'm sort of drawing them in my head. In my mind. So,
do you see them in terms of planes first?
No.
Okay, because that's where I've started as I draw people. But
no, I've abandoned anything I learned academically about drawing and figure drawing, and which was all important, and I'm glad I had it in art school. But I don't, I guess it's in there somewhere, but.
That's what I was saying. Art is imitation.
I don't pay attention. I'm not actually at this stage. I'm not interested in accuracy at all. I mean, I have to get a likeness. One thing I have the ability to do is get a likeness of somebody. I feel that's probably the only thing I feel confident about, that I can generally I can get a likeness. But I'm not even interested so much in that. It's just the process of drawing that, the pen on the paper, and seeing what comes of that. Because sometimes nothing will happen. But Sometimes magic happens, and that's what you're striving for.
Do you feel it in the moment?
At this moment?
In the moment. God, not this moment. I barely feel it. No, but do you feel it sometimes when you're drawing? This is working? When
it's happening, I can tell, yeah. But it's so rare. It's really, and you can't count on it. That's the frustrating thing. I can't be confident that that's going to happen when I sit down and work. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen. But when it does, then nothing's better than that when it does. The drawing in my book that I showed of John Ford, it's outside. Probably the first drawing.
Yeah, it's right on the left when you come in.
For me, that's my favorite drawing in the book. It just, that worked. That I felt that when I was drawing that. First of all, he's, as John Ford as an old man, and so he was an interesting character to draw. And that's what enables that to happen. When you've got the subject matter is already really interesting looking. Attractive people are the hardest to draw. It's really have a hard time with.
You said that your work brings you joy, and that's what I see. I see joy, I see humor, I see so much confidence, I see the beautiful balance, between the blocks of color and the delicacy of line and knowing when to start. And you say you have this critic. You say you're never really happy. And I know the secret to your success must be to be able to tell that critic to shut up. How do you deal with that?
I have a hard time telling that critic to shut up, and many, many years of therapy hasn't even helped me with that. But thank you for that, and I'm glad you see all that, because inside it's just all anxiety and frustration, and it's not what the end result. Fortunately, looks the way it does, but that's not what's happening inside here.
It's and again, this is just my experience. Drawing live, all the voices stop in my head, but drawing from a photo or a screen, everything is still there because there's a fixed reality, I guess, to what you're trying to render. Mm-hmm. Even though, like you said, you're not interested in photorealism or anything. You're still finding something else that's there. But I don't know. Do you do any live drawing, or are you pretty much?
I do. I don't get out much, so there's not a lot of opportunity for that. But
again, by live drawing, I mean trees. Literally, I do not mean people by any stretch of imagination.
I like to draw people, but I like to draw trees too. And I have a bunch of sketchbooks. Usually when I draw in sketchbooks is when I'm out somewhere. Last summer, I was invited to up to Maine. Peaks Island does a residency, and they invite a number of illustrators up over the course of each summer. They just started this a couple of years ago, and last summer, Susan and I went up and. They put you up, and so I brought my sketchbooks and did some drawing, and that's you do get into that kind of Zen state when drawing live, and because you filter everything else out, and it's and I try to achieve that when I'm working in the studio too. I mean. It is kind of a meditative process, drawing. So, getting back to what you were saying, I mean, it is the one way of shutting off all of those voices in my head is when I'm concentrating on drawing, because you can't really think about anything else. So,
I that's one of plenty, unfortunately. More questions? There, sir.
When you're drawing these people, Do you channel the music or what they represent?
Yeah, I do. If I'm drawing a musician, I'll often listen to their music while I'm drawing that particular person. I find that to be helpful. Not necessary, but it is kind of helpful, I think.
When you begin your drawing, the first time you put your pen to the paper, do you always start at the same place, at an outline of the face, or do you go to the nose first? And also, when you pick up the brush to put your watercolor, do you have a fixed palette?
Thank you for asking that. I've been dying to ask technical stuff like this.
I always start with the eye. The eye, and then the nose, and then the other eye.
Which one?
Well, generally it's the left eye, but it depends if the person's facing the other way.
And with the watercolors, do you have a set palette, or do you?
Yeah, I do. I have a palette that has all my colors arranged. So yeah, I know where the colors are that I'm going to be going for. Yeah.
Do you prefer working in color, or do you like keeping it black and white? I know it varies by the...
Yeah, I enjoy both, but I mean, because the main thing for me is drawing, the black and white appeals to me because that's where the drawing is. I'm not a painter, so I consider my work colored drawings. So when I add watercolor, I'm adding color to a drawing. But I do, and I often just use very limited color, limited areas of color. Not always, but often. And sometimes it's hard to know when to stop.
But, trust me, that was everything I was seeing, looking at your stuff. I'm like, he always leaves the right amount of space behind, and I always fill it up with lines and color. And, so yeah,
less is more sometimes.
So I've been told, and I just go maximal. But what are your favorite tools? I ask about pens and things like that as though...
I work with a rapidograph, which I think 3 other people in the world still use. But I still draw with a rapidograph. But I've used all kinds of pens over the years. Dip pens, which I still use dip pens also. But I've used fountain pens, and now there's so many fine liner pens. I use microns and the Pitt pen. But my main drawing is still done with a rapidograph.
Yeah, when I recorded with Ed Sorrell last year around Thanksgiving, I had a couple of microns with me. He'd never seen these. He apparently has just been using speedballs for the last 50 or 60 years, and I feel like I may have ruined his drawing now because, I got these other ones I can use. But anyway,
was he going to use them?
He fiddled around with it as well as the pocket brush that I had and did a little sketch of me, which was one of the greatest things ever to happen in my life. But, that's a separate story entirely. But I'll get more questions from you guys while we're... Yeah.
I was just thinking about the quote from Cartier-Bresson that if you live long enough, you get the face you deserve. And I wondered if you've drawn the same face over time, how, you said it's difficult to draw attractive people. Do you find people more beautiful as they age? And or when you seem to convey so much of what feels like the essence, the soul of a person in your drawings. Are you drawing an image? Are you reproducing an image, or are you feeling something about who they are as a being?
Wow.
Getting all metaphysical about your drawing now.
I'm already forgetting the first part of your question. But
as you age, do you get the face you deserve?
Yeah. I don't know if that's true, but I find as people age, they're more interesting as subject matter, for me anyway, drawing-wise. I mean, it's much more interesting to draw, a person with lines and wear on their face and years and their experiences. I'm happy to know that it comes across in drawing because I'm not conscious of it, if it's happening or not. I feel like sometimes getting the likeness isn't as important as getting the right feel of that person. So sometimes I don't feel I really hit the likeness, but it feels right, and I'll go with it then. On other cases, I feel I really have to nail the likeness. Otherwise, I'm not going to get paid for it if it's a job. I'm sorry if I don't know if that answered your question, Chip.
I'm interested in the improvisation. Since you work just directly in ink, I'm sure in your early years you made a lot of mistakes till you got what you wanted, but now, how quickly does that happen, and is that what sort of like waiting for the magic to happen?
That is the magic that happens, but I still make just as many mistakes. It's much harder to work that way than to work things out in a pencil sketch first. And for my assignment, I work in two different ways for my assignments. I'll do a direct pen sketch, but it's a little rougher, and that's what I show the client. Once they okay that, then I take that pen sketch, which is usually on a piece of tracing paper, I put it on a light box, and I will lightly pencil it off, and then I'll ink it. It's much more controlled, and I don't like working that way. I feel each stage kills the drawing a little more, and it's I can get away with it. I've gotten away with it for 48 years. So, and some people tell me they can't tell the difference between. I certainly know the difference. But the drawings I do for myself, I try to draw directly with pen, and that makes a big difference because it is that spontaneity and that improvisational quality that I'm after.
And you can see that in the lines just sort of, you can hear them. They have a whole melody to themselves. There's a rhythm throughout the whole work, and then there's splashes of colors. It's like someone hitting a cymbal or something. It's terrific.
Thank you, Dave.
Self-portraits. You ever experiment?
I would say I hope you do more of them, because there's an old one that I used on our podcast episode, and I really don't like that drawing.
That's a really old one.
Yeah, it is.
I have a more recent one. I don't draw myself that often, but I have, yeah. I guess now that I'm old, I should probably start drawing myself more. I don't have a good mirror in the studio. I have to get
excuses.
I am a convenient model, but I do draw my hands all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's the most immediate thing, to draw. It's right there, and so there's a lot of drawings of my hand and things.
I think doing the hair and how that starts to go out of control, I think is where you'd start with the self-portrait. But, or if I was sketching you while we were here, which God forbid ever happens.
Yeah, you mentioned that the raw materials is a photograph that you work from.
Yeah.
Are there times when you have a subject and you pool a few photos together and create your own innovation of a composite?
Of that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I try to get as many photos as possible. I don't like to work from just one, because you can't always get a sense, of the person. You're seeing one angle of that head, and even if I'm drawing, if it's an assignment, for example, and I have to get a likeness of that person. And if it's a head-on or slightly three-quarter, I want to know what the shape of the nose is, so I'll look for profiles as well. And, so yeah, I'll spread out and I'll print them out and spread them out. I'm still working that way like a dinosaur, but I'll spread them out on my drawing board in front of me and look at, at several at one time. And the thing with the drawing for myself, a lot of it is I'm not looking at the paper while I'm drawing. I'm looking at what I'm drawing from. And I find that's another thing that frees me up. It's sort of those of you that have been in art school or drawing classes or whatever know about blind contour. So it's sort of similar to blind contour or variation of blind contour drawing, where you're focused on what you're drawing from, whether it's a photograph or whether it's drawing someone from life or a tree or a building, whatever. Not looking at the paper allows for interesting things to happen. Sometimes, it's so out of whack, But I like that. I like when that happens. It makes it interesting and exciting. I'm not quite sure, happy accidents that happen. And so that's a big part of what I do, particularly for when I draw for myself.
When you mentioned the self-portraits and the likenesses, part of the face you most hate drawing, and you can say nose if you want, because it's my absolute worst part next to the mouth, which I always screw up. What's still a challenge for you, or is it vary from face to face?
It's not the nose, because, with a nose like this, I'm comfortable drawing noses. I'm so used to seeing noses. Getting eyes right, eyes are really key. And I can tell when I started drawing, like I said, I start with the eyes. I can draw one eye and know right off the bat, this is not working. Yeah, start over. I can get a sense of the person just by drawing one eye. And if I don't feel that when I've drawn that first eye, I know it's not going to work, so I'll start over again.
And that makes sense why you love the John Ford one.
He's got the eye patch.
Maybe you should go up and take a look at it. But,
More questions? One more question?
Yeah, I was just about to say, last person, who wants to...
You talked about sort of going past what you consider illustration, and you said you weren't quite sure what it was. Can you talk more about that?
Well, because those drawings, talking about the drawings I do for myself, where they're kind of drawings over drawing on the page. I just recently saw that there was an exhibit in Italy at a museum, and I'm trying to think of the word now. I love this word because it relates to what I was doing. Scarabocchio, and it means doodle or scribble. And it's an exhibit of work like that, but throughout the history of art, from from Renaissance times up to recent. And I would have loved to have seen that exhibit, but someone had posted it on Instagram, and it really it reminds me of this kind of thing that I'm trying to do, and I don't know, I don't know what to call it. I'm saying it's not illustration because it's not a narrative and it's not an assignment. There's no end goal here. It's just a process of drawing, and some of the images may be related, but and they could be, like with that Beckett. I made it work into something by adding Andre the Giant and putting some derbies on some of the figures, and the illustrator in me, which is hard to shake, wanted to make it more of a narrative. But some of these things that I'm doing, they don't have to necessarily be. Or a narrative appears that is completely unexpected, just by the nature of what I'm drawing. So I don't know. It's just, it's art. I don't know what else to call it.
That's good enough, Joe. I think you're just keep transcending. That's all I can say. So, everybody, let's thank Joe for the time today.
Thank you very much.
And that was Joe Ciardiello. His most recent book is A Fistful of Drawings from Fantagraphics. It really is a wonderful work and a great dive into Joe's art and the intertwined history of Westerns and the Italian-American experience. Go buy it. I'm in the acknowledgments if that... Well, that probably would turn you off. But if it gives you any further reason to buy the book, go do that. A Fistful of Drawings. Now, Joe's site, which features a ton of his illustrations as well as links about the book, is joeciardiello.com, which is JoeCiardiello.com. He's on Instagram as Joe Ciardiello, all one word, and on Twitter as Joe Ciardiello1, although he doesn't post much there. And I'll have links to all of this in the show and episode notes for this one, along with an image of that Beckett, Andre the Giant evolving line thing that he was talking about. It's really beautiful to look at. Oh, and you should definitely go visit Art Yard in Frenchtown, New Jersey. It's just a fantastic space and well curated with the various collections or exhibitions they have there. Absolute gem of a performance and exhibition space. So check that out at artyard.org, which is ARTYARD.org. And you can find out more about their programming and exhibits there. And I love Frenchtown in general, and the Frenchtown Bookshop is also really wonderful. So if you're getting down there, if you have a reason to go near Frenchtown, go see this stuff and say Gil sent you. They'll have no idea what you're talking about. Anyway, you can support the Virtual Memories Show by telling other people about it. Just let them know there's this podcast that comes out every week with these really fascinating conversations with people, and it's arcing towards episode 500, for which the host has no idea what he's going to do. And you can also support the show by letting me know what you like and don't like about it. Tell me who I should record with, what movie or TV show or book or music or art exhibition or piece of theater, whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by sending me a postcard, letter, email, DM, or by leaving a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. That goes directly to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about me picking up and getting stuck in a weird conversation with me. Messages can only be up to 3 minutes long, so if you're going to go really long, call back and leave a second one. And let me know if it would be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. You might have something that would be really neat for our listeners to hear, but I would never include something like that without the speaker's permission. So if you leave a message, let me know if it's cool to share. Now, if you've got money to spare, don't give it to me. I mean, I'd appreciate it, but, I've got a well-paying day job. My expenses for the podcast are pretty minimal. So really, help other people. There are individuals and institutions in need right now. And if you can donate anything, do that. Go through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Topato Go. There's a new one now, I think, called Crowdfunder. I think it's missing the E at the end. But you can find different crowdfunding platforms out there that'll help you identify people who are really in need right now. Now, when it comes to institutions or foundations, well, there's a lot of those too. Your local food bank, the Poor People's Campaign, freedom funds, abortion funds. We'll just put it in those terms instead of saying women's choice and all that. There are a lot of things you can do to try to help build a better world. So I hope you will. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. Now, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.